They weren't relying on simple consumer retail parameters. They were building a private, multinational, geopolitical trap.
The entire barter infrastructure was a highly volatile financial hazard, and the consumer alchemists in New York were the only individuals holding the unpayable check. The massive physical naval assets sitting in the Baltic docks didn't pour into agile product innovation or retail expansion loops. Instead, they were directly intended to serve as a desperate emergency liquidity tap that cracked completely open under geopolitical pressure. In early 1990, the management team wasn't watching consumer preference data. They weren't tracking active brand metrics. They were, for all intents and purposes, a total strategic hostage. Think about the sheer vulnerability of that position. A corporate boardroom masterfully trades soda syrup for an entire naval strike package, and then watches helplessly as the sudden, violent fragmentation of the Soviet Union turns their $3 billion maritime asset into immediate international legal garbage. But the unsettling truth of this historical business autopsy isn't just about the worthless rubles or the weaponless warships. It is about the violent operational collision of the Soviet Union's collapse. While the old executive regime in New York was busy celebrating and planning the doubling of their bottling footprint, the ink on the Belovesh Accords was instantly shattering their entire legal framework into 15 separate sovereign border disputes. The newly formed independent states, the localized shipyard managers, and the corrupt military officers looking to privatize national steel assets, they all became the competitive claimants for the very fleet Pepsi had legally purchased. It left an American soft drink company stranded in an international legal vacuum, trying to claim ownership of warships located inside a newly independent Ukraine. Today, the dream of the corporate naval empire is completely buried. The warships were eventually dragged away to face the cold finality of the cutting torch, and the ghost of this multi-billion-dollar barter failure remains a historic warning study in systemic risk allocation. They were sitting on millions of tons of non-earning, toxic military hardware that couldn't be legally moved without international safety clearance. Think about that staggering mathematical asymmetry. Why would a global soft drink provider willingly assume the hazardous waste liabilities of a foreign military strike force? Because the alternative was a flat, total write-off of their entire 20-year state monopoly investment. It was a beautifully manicured, geopolitical, financial charade. Leaked internal board communications and compliance logs later exposed the absolute desperation inside the international division. The company's top-tier strategists were repeatedly, explicitly warned that their chief Western competitor was preparing an aggressive, multi-million-dollar cash campaign to seize the newly opened post-Soviet markets. They knew their existing exclusive distribution rights were expiring alongside the central regime. They saw their parallel vodka export revenue loops drying up under sudden state factory privatization. So they desperately accepted the scrap steel fleet purely to keep their institutional footprint from being wiped out. They weren't protecting a maritime trade operation. They were fiercely protecting their expiring regional market monopoly. While the localized infrastructure of their bottling plants was being split across hostile new national borders, the financial alchemists in New York were busy writing off the single most bizarre, unliquidatable capital deficit in the history of consumer commerce.